October 2007. A 26-year-old unemployed designer is staring at a rent bill he can't pay. His bank account is basically empty. His roommate is in the same boat. And in about 2 weeks, they're gonna be on the street. Fast forward 18 months, and this same guy just secured $600,000 from one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious venture capital firms. This is how Brian Chesky went from selling cereal boxes to building a company worth over $100 billion. So Brian Chesky moves to San Francisco in October 2007 with his design school buddy Joe Gebbia. Both of them are 26 years old, fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design. Brian had been working some industrial design job in LA, literally designing toilet seats for reality TV shows. And he was completely miserable, so he quits, moves in with Joe, and they're gonna start something. They have no idea what, but something. Here's the problem. They don't have jobs, they don't have a business idea, and their landlord just hiked the rent by 25%. The rent is now $1,150 a month, which honestly doesn't sound like much today, but when you have zero income, it might as well be $1 million. They've got about 2 weeks before rent is due, and Brian's checking his bank account like it's gonna magically refill itself. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work that way. Now, most people in this situation would panic, maybe move back home, get a regular job. But Brian and Joe noticed something. There's this huge design conference coming to San Francisco that same month, the Industrial Designers Society of America conference. Every hotel in the city is completely booked. People are desperate for places to stay. And these two broke designers look around their apartment and think, we have a floor, we have some space, what if we just rent it out? So they'd go to the store, drop what little money they have on 3 air mattresses, throw together a basic website, and list their apartment as air bed and breakfast. They're charging $80 per person per night, which includes the air mattress, breakfast, and they'll even show you around the city. 3 people actually show up. One of them is a 30-year-old guy from India, one's a 35-year-old woman from Boston, and one's a 45-year-old father of 4 from Utah. And they're all sleeping on air mattresses in these guys' living room. Brian makes them Pop-Tarts for breakfast, which, really living up to that bed and breakfast promise. But something interesting happens. They have a great time. The guests love it. They're meeting locals, getting the real San Francisco experience, not just staying in some sterile hotel room. Brian and Joe make rent. Everyone's happy. And that weekend plants a seed. Now, you'd think after that success, they'd immediately scale this into a business, right? Wrong, because for the next year, basically nothing happens. They bring in their buddy Nathan Bletcherke, this Harvard tech guy, to actually build a proper website. They launch it in March 2008 for South by Southwest in Austin. They get exactly 2 bookings. One of them is Brian booking his own listing just to test it. Real impressive. They try again for the Democratic National Convention in Denver in August 2008. Remember, this is peak financial crisis time. The economy is imploding. But there's this massive political event, hotels are booked, so it should work, right? They get some press coverage, they crash their own website from the traffic, which sounds great until you realize the traffic isn't converting into bookings. They end up with 80 bookings total, which generates some revenue, but Brian and Joe are now $20,000 in debt each. They're maxing out credit cards just to keep this thing alive. Brian later called this period the trough of sorrows, which is honestly pretty accurate. So they're completely broke, investors have rejected them multiple times, nobody thinks strangers are gonna sleep in each other's homes, and they need money desperately. What do? If you're Brian Chesky, you sell cereal. I'm not kidding. They designed these special edition cereal boxes Obama-O's and Captain McCain's, themed after the presidential candidates. They bought 1,000 boxes of generic cereal, repackaged them in these custom boxes they designed, numbered them like collector's items, and sold them for $40 each. It's completely ridiculous, but it works. They make $30,000, which pulls them out of debt and keeps the lights on for a few more months. Here's where it gets interesting. Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, this famous startup accelerator, hears about the cereal thing and thinks if these guys can convince people to pay $40 for $4 worth of cereal, maybe they can convince strangers to sleep in each other's homes. So he invites them to join Y Combinator's Winter 2009 program. They get $20,000 in funding for exchange for 6% of the company. It's January 2009. Brian is 27 years old, and this is where everything changes. Paul Graham gives them advice that sounds completely insane for a tech startup. He tells them, go to your users, get to know them, get your customers one by one. And Brian says, but that won't scale. And Paul says, basically, I don't care, do it anyway. So Brian and Joe fly to New York City, which is where most of their listings are, and they start knocking on doors. They meet their hosts in person. They take professional photos of the apartments because they realize all the listings have terrible photos taken on flip phones. They're manually uploading these photos, helping hosts write better descriptions, actually talking to people about what they need. It's tedious, it's slow, it doesn't scale at all, but their revenue starts growing. In the first week of February 2009, they make $460 in fees. Second week, $897. Third week, $1428. They hit what they call ramen profitability, meaning they're making just enough to cover their rent and buy cheap food, which for Brian, Joe, and Nathan meant $4,000 a month. They literally taped this goal to their bathroom mirror. But more importantly, they're learning what actually matters. They discover that most of their hosts are in the exact same situation Brian and Joe were in back in October 2007. They desperately need the money to pay rent. This is the middle of the Great Recession. People are struggling, and Airbnb is actually helping them stay in their homes. By March 2009, they got 10,000 users and 2,500 listings. They officially shortened the name from Air Bed and Breakfast to just Airbnb. And then in April 2009, Greg McCain from Sequoia Capital, one of the most prestigious VC firms in Silicon Valley, invested $585,000 in seed funding. Let me put that in perspective. 18 months ago, Brian Chesky was an unemployed designer who couldn't pay his rent. Now he's 27, and one of the top venture capital firms in the world just bet over $500,000 on his company. That $585,000 investment, it would eventually be worth over $8 billion when Airbnb went public in 2020. So what can you actually learn from this if you're just getting started? Lesson 1, your desperation might be your opportunity. Brian wasn't trying to disrupt the hotel industry, he was just trying to make rent. The best business ideas often come from solving your own real problems, not from trying to find some massive market opportunity. Lesson 2, do things that don't scale. Brian and Joe literally flew across the country to take photos of apartments. That's insane for a tech platform, but that's what built the foundation. In the early days, your job isn't to scale, it's to figure out what actually works. Growth comes later. Lesson 3, rejection doesn't mean you're wrong. Multiple investors told them this idea would never work. They got rejected by Y Combinator twice before getting in. They failed at their SXWS launch, but they kept iterating. The market doesn't care about your first attempt. It cares about whether you're still trying after everyone else would have quit. Brian Chesky went from an unemployed designer sleeping on an air mattress he rented out to strangers to running a company worth over $100 billion. Not because he had some genius insight from day one, but because he was willing to keep going when he was broke, rejected, and everyone thought his idea was ridiculous. Sometimes that's all it takes. The end.